Sorry about that. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Vikings Happy Hour, sponsored by Lake Monster Brewing, That's Badass Wood Art, and Eastside Jiu-Jitsu. Another live show tonight. I think we're getting a good groove for Tuesdays. I feel like that kind of has been working a little bit better, though we are a little bit later than we used to be. Back in the day, we did 8 o'clock, and now it's 8:30. So
it's all my fault.
Hopefully,
coaching football.
hopefully we got some night owls out there ready to hang out with us this evening. Throw some questions in the chat. We're going to start off really by just talking about what the title of the show is, and it's should the Vikings kind of be concerned about the offensive line depth. I think it's one of those things where it's really tough now to address it because we're so far along kind of in the preseason, in that anybody you kind of would sign off the street, there's kind of a reason they're on the street. But let's just talk about the offensive line as a whole. Anybody on your radar that is like actually playing well with the second team? I'm not so much concerned with like the tackles on the first team, but everything after that with interior guard play, Garrett Bradbury in the one rep that we saw circulating Twitter the other week. What are your overall thoughts on the offensive line?
I mean, it's not very positive. I mean, even with our starting interior, I mean, obviously another year of continuity might help, but overall, it's just not super exciting players there at those positions. Knowing what we know about, how Ingram's played in the preseason thus far. Garrett Bradbury had a little bit of a resurgence last year, and then he had a couple practice reps against the really stout Tennessee Titans front on their D-line, and they pushed him around pretty good. And Ezra Cleveland, I think he rated like 6th or 8th best guard last year overall, but yeah, I think that was like anchored by a few really, really, really good games, but he had quite a few just like poor outings as well. So he's not the model of consistency, I guess, is the issue there. So when you look at just those three alone, and then the depth that goes behind that, I mean, we saw some good things out of Oli Udoh last year at tackle, but again, he got beat up a little bit this last preseason game. Blake Brando in spots last year I thought played really well. Now he's kind of moving all over the line, so not sure what to expect of him at guard. Vidarian Lowe's brand new now. By all accounts, he's actually played pretty well preseason, enough to maybe kick Brando inside for those depth purposes. And we know what we had in Schlottman last year when he had to come in for Bradbury. It had a lot of us begging for Bradbury to come back, which is remarkable considering we all wanted him out in the first place. So it's one of those things where the depth isn't great. I don't think anyone in the NFL's depth is going to be that great on the offensive line. However, when we're worried about 3 of our 5 starting offensive linemen, that's where you probably should have maybe addressed it a bit more in the offseason.
Let me pose a question for you. Are you more concerned with Ezra Cleveland or Ed Ingram at this point?
From a play-to-play basis or a game-to-game basis, it would be Ed Ingram.
Yeah.
But he's young, right? Like it takes offensive linemen. Yeah, he's not Drew Samia, and he's young, right? So he's got time to learn and develop and whatnot. Ezra's in his last year of his deal, unless we want to extend, and so from the long-term perspective, right? Like we're going to probably have to fill that spot either with a lucrative contract, which do we really want to pay for, as I had previously mentioned, an inconsistent player, or we're going to have to fill that at some point next year. So from a game-to-game basis, so I think Ezra is probably a little bit more reliable than Ed Ingram, but I do think Ed has the skill set to be able to develop and grow into that role.
Yeah, I agree. And what's up, Dan? Thanks for joining us tonight. We're talking offensive line. Clifford, what's up, buddy? We're talking offensive line and whether or not we should really be concerned about it. And I think through the first couple preseason games, as Ryan kind of alluded, like nobody's depth on the offensive line is really great. In fact, that's probably a weak point in just the NFL as a whole, just offensive line talent. So the fact that we do have like 5 suitable starting positions across the offensive line is a bonus. And so I don't know. For me, though, what concerns me the most is they brought in Dalton Reisner for a specific purpose, right? They something doesn't feel right to them when it comes to the offensive line. Dan wants Dan wants them the Vikings to hire him to scout linemen. They should have scouted Ryan, to be honest, or they should have hired Ryan. If Ryan was the GM in what was that, 2019?
2020.
2020, we would have had Creed Humphrey, so we would have
2021? 2021.
Creed Humphrey. I know there's another guy out there.
But like also I have, honestly, Dan has a good track record. I've actually kind of kept tabs on who he likes in the draft each year. And for the most part, the guys that he mentions in our in our shows talking about prospects, they usually have panned out. I believe he was a Frank Ragnow guy.
Throw him in the chat, Dan. I'm curious who you had pegged back in the day.
He loved Creed Humphrey, as I did. So he's hit pretty well. I've actually had quite a few misses in terms of, I mean, obviously some of these Oklahoma guys, Drew Samia, Cody Ford, but there's been other misses as well. I think Dan probably would be better suited for that position than me.
The Cody Ford one, to me, back in the day, it just surprises me he didn't pan out as well as I thought he would, because that Oklahoma offensive line back when he was there was, I mean, it was across the line. Now, of course, I can't remember all the names on that offensive line, but
Cody Ford, Drew Samia, who flamed out, Creed Humphrey, and then Ben Powers, who just got a pretty decent contract from the Broncos. And it's funny because Drew Samia was supposed to be the stud of that, not Ben Powers. He was kind of the afterthought. Still got drafted, I think, like 4th round. But he did well in Baltimore, and then worked his way into a lucrative payday with the Broncos. So, and then Orlando Brown. So it was a pretty damn good line.
We got a comment from Clifford here, and anyone else, feel free to throw in some questions. We're just kind of riffing this evening, but is it true that they want to wait until after game 1 for Reisner, so none of his contract would be guaranteed? I think that was something last year too, I remember. And I shame on me, I can't remember like the intricacies of why you would want to wait, but it has to do with being like a vested veteran, right?
Yeah, and there's some sort of rule where if you're not on like the opening day roster, any contract given after that is, it doesn't require to be guaranteed or something like that.
I'm gonna look quick.
Yeah, I forget what the rule was, because I remember we did this. I think we did this last year, where we were waiting for, because we knew he wouldn't get picked up on waivers, so we cut him last day of camp or whatever, and then we re-signed him after the first week, or after some sort of period where I can't remember exactly when it was, but
yeah.
Ricky Steinberg, Arkansas. Yeah, he was Cleveland there. I think there were some concerns, but yeah, I mean, we'll see how he does. I liked him as well. Yeah, Eric McCoy, Frank Ragnow, Dalton Reisner.
I have an article here kind of explaining it a little bit more. So it basically just says that in the NFL, a player becomes a vested veteran after accruing 4 seasons of experience, and that status comes with a notable benefit. For one, it allows players to avoid the waiver wire prior to the trade deadline, and when a vested veteran is cut from January to mid-October, they become free agents immediately, but they also receive the benefit of fully guaranteed salaries if they're on the week 1 roster on game day.
So that must be it.
So yes, that is the rule. This is back from actually last year because they were talking about the Odell Beckham Jr. situation back then. So interesting, very interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think for the Vikings, you're kind of torn if you want to go and sign Reisner not even long term, but just for this season, because with so much dead cap coming next year, any cap that you have this year to roll over will be helpful. At the same time, if you want a guy like Dalton Reisner, like I'd have to imagine I think our cap space is around 10 million right now, and so you're looking at 4-5 remaining the rest of the regular season, and should something happen, you just want to have that flexibility, or if a trade presents itself, much like the TJ
but
Hockenson
also
one.
like these guys need to understand, like, hey, they probably do understand, but if you don't have a contract right now, having a contract's better than not having a contract, even if it's for a little bit lower money than what you deservedly probably should get. Go out there and prove it and get a bigger payday next year. Because if you just sit out a year, that it's not like that number is going to keep increasing, right? Like you got to get on the field and show what you can do. And there's a couple guys out there. I mean, Dalton Reisner is the big one that we've mentioned multiple times, just given the fact that he actually had a visit. But like a guy, and this isn't like a super sexy name. Some people might not have even heard of this guy, but Chase Roulier, I don't know how to say his last name. He's been the center for the Washington Commanders for quite a few years now. I think like 4 or 5 years. I think he played for them. Why wouldn't you have him on roster over like an Austin Schlottman, right? Like Schlottman's fine, but like if you really want like a good quality player to be behind Bradbury, and who probably can play a bit guard, that's another guy that potentially could be a fit. You look at Dalton Reisner, Michael Scofield. I know Miles has been in on him for the last couple years because I think he was with the Chargers a couple seasons ago, and then the Colts. And I believe he's still available. And he had a heck of a year last year. He played pretty well. I mean, not like great, but he played better than Reisner did. And he kind of fits what this offense is looking to do, who's a little bit more, now granted, he's getting up there in age. I think he's like 32, which is kind of weird saying that, us being in that age range. But he's kind of getting up there in age, though, so maybe slowing down a little. But yeah, you look at guys like that, and it's like, why do we have some of the people we have on roster? In my opinion,
I also, first off, just with the Michael Scofield comment, I don't know if you ever saw Prison Break, but that person's name, like the main character's name, was also Michael Scofield.
Oh, really?
So that always threw me off. But I remember liking him coming out of the draft. Him and Forrest Lamp both had just injury issues, right? Like that was kind of their big thing in I guess it's now technically the Los Angeles Chargers, but the San Diego Chargers is just kind of injury prone.
Yeah.
So I guess
and I don't think Forrest Lamp ever like figured it out either. And didn't they have like Dan Feeney as well? I think he's just kind of become a
Why do we
backup
remember these names?
Because we all wanted them back in the day when our line was
space.
horrible back then still too. So
there was a big Dalton Reisner crowd here back in the day in Vikings world.
Yeah, it was a big fight between Reisner or Ford as being like the guys we wanted. And I think there was
prior to that was Will Hernandez.
The Will Hernandez hive. Yep. It was actually funny. I was doing like a remock back of going dating back to 2017. I did one for 2017, 2018, 2019. And when I got to the end of the 2018 like first round, Will Hernandez was right there, and it just made me just chuckle. Obviously I didn't take him because he wasn't very good, but it's kind of funny.
It is kind of funny to just like go back to those mock drafts and be like, what the hell were we thinking? Right. I mean, you just get caught up in the hype, so it is what it is. But I think short answer to our main question of the night is I think, yeah, the Vikings probably should be a little bit apprehensive as they head into the season. And I don't think it's lost on Kevin O'Connell or Kwesi. I think they realize that something has to happen with the offensive line. It's just given the time of the year, there just really isn't that much they can do other than hope these guys progress, hope they kind of find a groove. You could go and get Dalton Reisner or any number of the other people that you listed. My guess is they want starting jobs.
Right.
And will they settle for not only less money, but potentially not a starting gig, right? So then you got a vested veteran has to earn their way on the field. Like, they're not going to entertain that. They're more likely to probably sit and wait until an injury happens and then sign with that team. So we'll get another opportunity to see this offensive line this weekend against the Cardinals. I still think Vidarian Lowe has shown some promise. He's not hopefully ever going to see the field with Darisaw ahead of him. But I also liked what I saw from Blake Brando. I know we talked about it in our last episode, just about kind of the studs from last weekend's preseason game versus the Titans. But Blake Brando was another guy who, he picked up stunts really well. I thought his footwork and just his point of attack when he, gets out of his block there or his stance looked really good. A couple of hiccups, but he's also moving inside to guard, and that's a really difficult transition as well. I think I remember last week he was left guard, and then this week he was right guard, if I remember that. And so they're just kind of tossing him all over the line. So that's difficult for any player, let alone Blake Brando, who this is just kind of bouncing inside and out. So, we kind of touched on it in our other episode, but I want to transition to Lewis Cine. A big talking point yesterday. I kind of went on. I'm just going to keep calling it Twitter. I don't want to have to keep going back and forth to Twitter, formerly known as X, so on and so forth. But I made a post yesterday on Twitter, kind of talking about there were some pretty outlandish takes on Lewis Cine. I saw some people go as far as to say that they should cut him from the roster. And I just kind of said that the Lewis Cine slander has to stop through 2 games, like 2 preseason games, given everything that he has gone through. It's the second defensive scheme. And so he essentially missed all of his rookie year. And I think people forget too, last preseason he was hurt as well. And so he missed a lot of snaps. He didn't play week 1, week 2 and 3. He was just trying to get his feet wet in week 4. Obviously, we know what happened there with the compound fracture. And so maybe you have a different tune to this, because I saw some fair arguments, though I don't agree with them on the other side. But people are like, well, as a first-round rookie, regardless of injury, he should be competing for these starting jobs, and he's being beaten out by Metellus and Cam Bynum, and somebody even suggested Theo Jackson is beating him out at this point. But I say what we've seen on tape and his speed and athleticism and his read and reactability has been good. So I don't feel like we should give up on him yet. But, do you feel differently? Do you feel like we should be
No, it's ridiculous. Like, all right, so he's getting a whole lot of reps right now, and why do you think that is? Because he has not played a lot of football since he's become a pro because of these injuries, right? So they're giving him every rep possible because he needs to be on the field. It's kind of like this whole, going a little off topic here, but it's kind of like this whole Trey Lance thing, right? Like, Trey Lance has played like 0 football since high school, basically. and yeah, he's not going to get to show his true potential if he's just sitting on the bench and continuing to sit on the bench, right?
Yeah.
So, like, it's the same concept here with Cine. Like, he needs to get out there in reps, whether that's versus the 2s, the 3s, whatever it is. Now, sure, yeah, go ahead and cut the guy because he missed 1 tackle against a very elusive rusher. Like, come on. Like, I've seen Harrison Smith miss tackles too. Should we cut him? Like,
yeah.
No, and like he.
By the way, on that specific play, I went back and watched everything, all 22 and whatnot. You could argue, I know that Lewis went in, maybe even a little too low on the tackle. But Ivan Pace totally misread the play and kind of got caught up in some blockers and fell. If he reads and reacts accordingly, and this is not to crap on Ivan Pace, I think he's done a phenomenal job thus far. But if he reads the play correctly and doesn't get, caught up in the offensive line there, I mean, he's right there in that gap, and it's him and Cine making the play. And my guess is one goes high, one goes low, whatever. But there's two guys there instead of just Lewis Cine trying to make a good play, which he was known for being a hard hitter coming out of college. And so he's going to take those chances, and he might miss on some. And it just is what it is.
Yeah, a bit of a miscalculation on that tackle, going for an ankle tackle versus just trying to wrap up, right? Obviously, he needs to cut that out. I mean, I was there, right? Like that happened in the end zone that I sit in. And sure, you can probably tell I was not happy. I'm like yelling, like, this is why you're not whatever I said, right? Like I was annoyed. But like when you look at it from like an objective viewpoint, not as just like a pure fan of Vikings football, that's a tough play for any player to make, let alone, somebody who's just coming back from injury and whatnot. Now, yes, he was a first round rookie or a first round pick, I should say. So he should be able to make these plays. But like I've said, Harrison Smith's missed that play before. Troy Polamalu missed that play. Ed Reed, like you're not going to be 100%. And we're like amplifying this one play in a preseason game that, and again, I said this on last night's show too. And where's the praise for the sack that he got? Where's the praise for the tackle for loss that he got on a big third down stop? Where's the praise for him basically being in the right spot almost every single time? Like almost every single time he's there. He's not always making the play, but he's almost always in the right spot. Exactly. Yeah. Like I'm not going to be mad at a player. Like I was watching, I coach football and I was watching I was coaching my son's game last night. And there was a play where, one of our safety just completely misread the play, wide open guy in the corner for a touchdown. They scored, right? Now, it's not like Lewis Cine's doing that. He's around the ball. He's making the play. He's not misreading things. He's just got to finish. And again, I think this was 2 games ago. I just remember a specific play where he crashed and who was it? Charbonnet just bowled him over, but he was there. He made contact. He got knocked over, but Charbonnet only got 2 more yards because Ivan Pace was there to clean it up because Cine stopped him, right? He slowed him down significantly. So like, no, I'm completely okay with how Cine's played thus far in the preseason. I think he's still got a bright future ahead of him. And we'll kind of see what opportunities he gets because I bet Brian Flores wants to put him on the field because of his play style.
There was another play in the film that I watched, and I should show you the clip I'm talking about. But Cine is just kind of like looming over like a general area. In Malik Willis, he looked at it and he was ready to throw the ball, and he saw Lewis Cine kind of creeping in, and he made him pull it. Now, granted, he just snuck out of the pocket and scrambled for like a 10-yard gain, whatever it was. But he's even, and I don't want to put too much praise on Lewis Cine because it is preseason. It's against backups like Malik Willis is second, maybe third string on the Titans. But the threat was there for a game that means a lot for these players that, Lewis Cine's got the closing speed that he didn't want to throw that ball. And so I don't know. I kind of hate the conversation about his performances thus far, but
Clifford's right. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Clifford brings up a good point. I think the expectations are probably too high, and that's why fans are probably,
well, and it's not even that they're too high per se. It's just that it's who we got instead of who we could have had, right? Like we stayed put at, what was it, 14 or 13 or wherever we were last year. And we draft Kyle Hamilton, who played lights out last year and is by all accounts supposed to start he made Chuck Clark expendable, right? So who in his own right's a good safety. we're basically saying, hey, we believe Cine is as good as Kyle Hamilton. We're willing to trade back and go get him rather than draft you, Kyle Hamilton. And so again, it creates those expectations of like more or less the comparisons that he has with Hamilton, which again isn't necessarily fair, especially with the injury that
Yes.
you know throw that in there. But I liked the trade. I was one of the few who did. Obviously, yes, we should have got more, but we needed picks. We needed additional picks. We had a lot of work to do. And through
Yeah.
that trade, we got multiple chances to swing at some players that, you know, hopefully will pan out.
Let me ask you a question. Well, it's twofold here. So one is more like just a comment overall. The situation with us passing on Kyle Hamilton reminds me because Kyle Hamilton coming out was, I mean, he was touted as in just an unreal safety that we haven't seen in a long time. But it reminds me, and I'm gonna butcher this. I'm just gonna check quick. Yes, it reminds me of when the Packers a few years ago, and I guess it's longer than a few. It's 2018. Um, Traded out of their draft pick when they had a need at safety. They traded out and passed on Derwin James, who turned out to be just a great safety, and then they kept rotating. Was that Clinton Dix was
Darnell
before them.
Savage and all
Darnell
those
Savage,
guys.
yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So it feels very, like, similar to that almost, but to your point, we needed more picks last year. So the question I was gonna pose to you, though, was, let's say the Ravens call you today, and they say, "Hey, sorry about that," and they're not talking about the Kari Vedvik trade, they're talking about, uh, just the fact that they got that Kyle Hamilton, but they're like, "Hey, sorry you traded out. You didn't get Kyle Hamilton. We'll trade you Kyle Hamilton today for Lewis Cine and Andrew Booth." Do you do it?
I mean, probably. I mean, yes, because he's played really, really well, and the other two haven't, and they've had injury issues and all that, right? Lewis's hurt again right now, apparently. So it's like, yes, there's some injury issues. So yes, you're going to take the more stable and high quality player out of that deal. Obviously, they would never do that. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean that you know you give up on these guys. I mean, they're both insanely talented players. They just need to stay healthy and they just need to get more reps.
Yeah.
I think Andrew Booth has progressed well in this preseason thus far. He's
You
still
said he
not
had a
great.
bad play, in Saturday's game because he missed that open field
I
tackle?
mean, it's not a bad play. You just miss an open field tackle against an elusive runner. It's the same thing that Lewis Cine did. Like you're going against
Yeah.
Tajay Spears. He's known for making people miss in the open space, and we needed that third down play. Like we needed the stop to stop the drive from continuing. And I mean, he was there. He was
Yeah.
there to make the play. He
Yeah.
you know he slips right off the tackle. They couldn't grab that ankle and they get the first. But again, he's there to make the play. He made the right read. You got to finish the play, but at least he's there. And at least, and again, the rest of the game, he had a good game, I thought.
Yeah. I do have another comment on that, but I see some folks in the chat again. Dustin, Dan, Clifford. Thank you guys for the comments. Anybody else, feel free to throw some comments, questions in there. And be sure to like and subscribe. The regular season's around the corner, and we all know that this show gets a little bit wilder when the regular season kicks off. So like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, anywhere you get your podcast, share with your friends and family. We would appreciate that here. One last comment on Andrew Booth. The thing that stood out to me the most in Saturday's game was because he did make a few mistakes, just like coverage wise. Not that anything was glaring, because Malik Willis is a little bit inaccurate, and it just doesn't matter. But he was learning from it throughout the game. So there was like an example where him and Cine weren't quite on the same page of whose responsibility was to cover the deep post and who was to take the underneath crosser. They fixed it on the second go round. And so it's those little things that you can make a mistake in the NFL as a young player, but are you learning from those mistakes? And I think that's where we really have to differentiate what's going on with these. Essentially, Lewis Cine and Andrew Booth are I'm deeming them as another rookie season just because I don't feel like they truly had one last year.
Yeah, they're so hurt. And what I love to hear about them too, from what I've heard all off season, is they are in there putting in the work.
Yeah.
Lewis was there all off season, even when he didn't need to be, and he was putting in the work. Andrew Booth, from what I heard, same thing, just in there when he didn't need to be, training, trying to get better, trying to get healthy, working with the strength and conditioning people, and trying to stay on the field this year and be able to contribute. And I think
Yeah.
they're both going to it this year, whether it's just special teams or if they get called into action. I think they're going to surprise some people this year.
Yeah, and we don't see all that stuff either. I think we've made points of it on this show, but we only see what they put on the field, right? But there is so much more that goes into it beyond the scenes. Meeting rooms, practice field, working out, diet and nutrition. I don't know if you watched the Johnny Manziel documentary yet on Netflix,
Well,
but
maybe let's not mention that one, and maybe mention the one our player was actually on and watching quarterback, because
well,
Johnny Manziel's the worst.
the
I
reason I
didn't watch it.
brought up Johnny Manziel is because they point out a portion where he doesn't really follow the nutrition. He doesn't really follow film or look at film. And so
I saw circulating on Twitter, he had like 0 hours logged on his iPad
yeah,
or his playbook. It's just like, all right.
the
Yeah.
craziest thing from that Netflix, and it's not worth your time to go watch. So everybody knows he's kind of a piece of shit, and the documentary didn't make me feel any better about or for him. But the crazy thing is, I guess him and his wide receivers before their like draft prep or whatever for the Cleveland Browns, they all went out and partied and got absolutely fucking hammered. And Johnny Manziel's agent was running routes for him in front of the Browns, and the Browns still thought to themselves, "Yeah, let's draft that guy and make him our starting quarterback." They're just idiots.
Yeah.
Absolutely idiots.
I mean, they wanted the show that came along with them, but that's all right.
I saw
I'm
you throw
glad
up
they
some
did, because I'm
comments
sure
there.
we would have, and that would have been worse. So
Yes. Yes, Frozen North. Manziel 0-minute film review on iPad.
brutal.
Dan brings up a good point. I think our season will be defined by how our defense progresses throughout the year. I totally agree.
And even probably more specifically the DBs, because they're going to have a lot more pressure than they had last year on them. Last year was much more of a shell. This year they're going to be asked to play a lot of one-on-one while we bring the house up front. Obviously, we need those guys up front to produce, right? But we are putting some of these guys on islands, and it's a young core.
Yeah.
Byron Murphy's the leader of that cornerback room, and then behind him is a bunch of second year and first year guys. So we'll see how Blackman can hold up. We'll see how Booth and Evans can hold up. And then at the safety group, obviously we have a little bit more senior leadership there, but still quite a bit of responsibility. So really excited to see how they progress and see if they can, take us from what I think we were 31st last year. And hopefully we can get into like that 20 range at worst.
Yeah, I think my biggest concern, and I've stated this 100 times by now, but the defensive line really concerns me. Just because beyond Danielle Hunter, I guess Harrison Phillips, I would throw him into this mix as well, but it's just a bunch of kind of unknowns, and I guess the defense in general is a bunch of unknowns, and we're just kind of hoping someone steps up. Like Ivan Pace has done that thus far, but to be honest, that's like the last spot I wanted someone to step up as linebacker, because I did trust Brian Asamoah to kind of take that next step this year. And so I
And I
wish
think they will. And you want depth there because of how much they do
right.
blitz. They're going to rotate more than they would have in previous years. And
Yeah.
we have Marcus Davenport.
But
I think
again,
people are
potential.
overlooking him a little bit because of the half a sack year last year. Again, look at the pressures. The pressures were there, and
I'm checking.
the year before that, he had 9 sacks. So like he's not just like some guy we overpaid for his potential. I think he has proven to get after the quarterback. And I think he'll continue to do so this year, especially with Daniel Hunter on the other side. I think that gives him a lot of opportunity.
Do you remember how many pressures he had last season?
I don't off the top of my head. I can probably look it up quick.
I got it right here. Let me just it's just loading, but
Sure.
yeah, I mean, I know that we were super happy, and I still am happy with the Marcus Davenport pick or signing, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I just oh yeah, it's on 2023 right now. I'm just kind of concerned about because he's got a history of injuries, right?
Yeah, he had 26 hurries last year,
Yeah, you beat
34
me to
total
it.
pressures, and he graded out well both against the pass and run. So yeah, like I think he's more of a known commodity, probably especially in the NFL circles, than maybe because again, if you have an outside linebacker or edge who's not consistently getting sacks, it's
Yeah,
just not a great look. But when you look at everything that he's doing, I mean, PFF's not going to grade him into the 70s for no reason, right? So,
yeah,
um, and PFF's not the end all be all, but when you see a lot of green on there, that's good. So I'm excited for him. I'm excited for Hunter. Yeah, you said Harrison Phillips. I think he getting back to more of that 3-4 D end
hmm
position is going to do him well. And then Dean Lowry, I mean, again, he's not sexy, but he's going to be consistent there. I mean, he has been for years with the Packers.
yeah,
Kyrus Tonga is a complete unknown, like you mentioned, though. Our DBs, or our corners, I should say, are pretty unknown. So we'll see
yeah.
how that goes.
I see a few new people in the chat, by the way. Frozen North and Newt, welcome to Vikings Happy Hour. I don't think that I've seen you here before, and if you have been, I apologize, but thank you for joining and hopping in the chat here this evening. Dan asked the question: anyone besides Reisner you would like to sign?
That's a good question. I mean, probably there's definitely going to be names out there right now. There are probably a few, and I'm just, off the top of my head, I probably wouldn't mind bringing in another veteran corner.
Yeah,
Whether they are going to play a lot or not, just having another veteran presence in that room would be, I think, beneficial. Offensive line help uh, would be great. And then there's going to be people who are cut. There are
yeah,
going to be options out there. One that we kind of mentioned yesterday that there's potential there is at running back. We have Ty Chandler. He's played okay. I think he's played good, not great in the preseason. And but outside of that, Kenny Wangu has been hurt,
still
and
nothing
yeah, I
on
haven't
him,
heard
by the
anything
way.
on what it is. Yeah,
You're
um,
memorable to us, Frozen North.
and then Dwayne McBride has not really shown much. Um, you know, short goal line kind of stuff maybe, but outside of that, he just doesn't have much burst. We had that. I'm forgetting his name. The guy we just signed, who actually played pretty well this last week. I forget his name. Dykes, I think. Yeah,
Yep,
Dykes.
Aaron
Uh,
Dykes.
yeah, he played pretty well, but again, he's probably not somebody you want to rely on. So, we have sniffed around with a couple names like Kareem Hunt and
Mike Davis.
Mike Davis, and there's going to be play. I mean, there's some teams that have serious depth at
Mhm.
the running back spot. So one group that was mentioned was the New York Jets. They're going to have either Boogie Knight, or I think it's Zonovan is his actual name, Zonovan Knight, and or Michael Carter. I think Michael Carter would be a perfect complement to Alexander Madison. So that's a
Yeah,
name that I would be really excited about. So I think there's definitely some position groups that we need to keep an eye out for during cut down days
yeah,
and see if we potentially can bring somebody in.
yeah, yeah, 100%, and, I think I haven't looked too much into it, but it's all about connections too, right? So when you think about some of these position groups, l go look at, like, who is in charge of that group. So, like, the running back room, I forget what the coach's name is, but connections to players in the NFL could be a direct correlation to us potentially signing them. When you think about Dalton Reisner and his visit, the offensive line coach here in Minnesota, Chris Cooper,
Mhm.
um, coached him in Denver, and so I know we talk about nepotism and all of that stuff in the NFL, and we don't have it as much anymore with Mike Zimmer gone. But it is still a who you know business, and
for sure. I mean,
so
and when you know a system, right, it makes, especially these late
streamlines everything.
additions. Yeah,
Yes.
these late additions coming in late, it makes that much simpler. I mean, absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, Clifford asked a question here of, do we think that we're going to keep three quarterbacks on the 53? I do, and the main reason why is because they put in a new rule this year where that third quarterback doesn't count against your 53, if I remember that correctly. So you can keep Jaren Hall without subjecting him over to the waiver wire, or and you can keep him there and not have it count against your 53.
Yeah. Yeah. I think now that that new rule is kind of instigated with what was it? The 49ers, where you can dress essentially you can dress a third quarterback on game day. It just makes more sense to keep three quarterbacks on roster now, because you cannot the rule says you cannot elevate a quarterback from the practice squad and then activate them on game day. At least I think that was kind of the rule. I don't have it in front of me. So yeah, and I actually think the Vikings have a good quarterback room. It's been a long time that I can feel comfortable saying, like, yeah, if Kirk Cousins missed the game, I think Nick Mullins could maybe, you know, find a little bit of luck and win. Now, if Kirk Cousins is out for a long time, then you have to ask yourself, do you keep playing Nick Mullins, or do you throw Jaren Hall into the fire and see what he's got?
Yeah, no, I don't think. I mean, I guess we don't know for sure because that was Mike Zimmer's scheme. But we all had that big fight where we going to play? What was that Oregon State kid? I already drank Mannion, or are we going to play Kellen Mond? And
They
obviously,
should
Kellen
have
Mond
played
was.
Kellen Mond.
I still believe that they should have. At least we could have known at that point that let's just cut him.
It's like the
But
Joe
yes,
Webb thing, right? When they just threw Joe Webb in there and
we'll see what he can do.
the
Yeah.
Packers were like, what is going on?
Clifford, thanks for looking it up or already knowing the rule. So yes, it does count against your 53, but not against your game day actives. Okay.
Yes.
So that, but yeah, I still think we keep three. I don't
Yeah.
think you want to subject Jaren Hall to waivers. I mean, I don't think he's a great quarterback by any means, at least at this point. But we subjected Kellen Mond to waivers, and he got picked up pretty quickly. And Jaren Hall, I think,
It has
is
more
at
talent.
least at least as good as Kellen Mond. So
Yeah. Let's talk about some of the quick hitters from practice today. Obviously, it's getting steamy. The Vikings joint practice with the Cardinals is going to kick off tomorrow. They moved it up just due to the heat here in Minnesota. I think today was a nice
97.
97 degrees, and you just walk outside and you feel wet.
I think it felt like 108 at one point just
Yeah.
because of the humidity. Yeah.
Yeah. I got in my car just to like start it and leave work today, and I was already sweating. It was brutal. But there were some talking points today from practice. So Makai Blackman was back at practice today, which is great news. Avoided an injury. I'm trying to see the other stuff here. I have it written down in my little notes tab. Asamoah back. I don't think we've really talked about that, actually.
I was just a little disappointed that he couldn't play last game just because my son, I don't know why, but like because of my love for him, my son absolutely loves him. My daughters, that's their favorite player now too, I guess. I wore his shirt Z out to the game just because he just I don't even care if he ends up being this like great player or anything. His energy is just infectious. I just
Yeah.
love it. Yeah, he's somebody you want to win because he's just fun and exciting to watch. So hopefully he's healthy. Hopefully he can get back in the swing of things and be able to dominate on game days coming up here in a couple weeks.
Yeah. One thing we didn't talk about when we previously talked about Lewis Cine was that he did get hurt in practice yesterday. Came up, tweaked something. People said he limped off into the trainer's room.
Thought I heard groin, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. I think I read that too. And he didn't practice today. And so I guess now when you think about that, he's not going to play this weekend. Like, there's no way they throw him out there. They'd probably just play it safe, but that opens the door for Theo Jackson, who people have said has played well throughout training camp. I doubt the team carries 5 safeties, but I suppose they could. I mean, we've talked about how they're going to have to make a lot of tough decisions across the roster, and we can kind of use this as our last talking point, but what kind of, like, what positions are you looking at where you're like, what are you going to do here?
Yeah, I kinda sent you and Miles just kind of like a little mock, 53 man,
53
just like
man.
off of my, I don't know, that last game, and I'll
Mhm.
see if I can scroll up to it real quick just to take a look at exactly what I had said, but, I think there's gonna be some interesting calls, at receiver.
Yeah.
Just because we have, obviously we haven't seen Naylor play at all this preseason really. And then Tristan Jackson's shown to play well, and other receivers that are more highly touted, at least just from draft position perspective, hasn't played as well or has been running wrong routes and things like that. So it'll be interesting to see, like, can Jackson's excitement that he's had, or do we only carry 5, right? So there's that perspective as well. But like, can Jackson's like momentum that he's had a pretty solid preseason trump that draft capital, right? So that should be interesting. The D line, I think, is going to be kind of interesting, that all that interior, just
Yeah.
because there's a bunch of names and we'll see who can make it through. Like, old man Sheldon Day actually has given us some juice on that D line from the last game. And,
Yes.
does that hurt the chances of like Otemu, right? Who's a draft pick. So I wouldn't assume it is, but does that hurt his chances? Or like Jonathan Bullard, I hadn't heard much about him this preseason. So can some of the, potentially lose a spot there? Linebacker again should be interesting. Who gets that like 4th linebacker
Mhm.
spot? I think 3 of them are locked in, but we brought in Troy Reeder. We have Troy Dye, who had that big interception, so that'll be a look there. The back end of that CB room, and then
Yeah.
like you had mentioned, safety Theo Jackson has been playing well. We have a draft pick in Jay Ward. So what do we do there? So it should be interesting. There's going to be a few different battles there.
Yeah, and we're gonna break that kind of down next week. Maybe we'll do it on the Tuesday live show. Um, just go and give a little breakdown of who we think is gonna make the 53. I don't think, when is cut day? Cut down day for
Uh,
the NFL.
I forget. I forget the specific day.
Oh, it is next Tuesday, actually. So we'll have to do it before then.
Yeah, maybe
uh,
Monday show.
yeah, maybe we go live Monday. And do that. But yeah, we'll do a little breakdown on who we think is going to be.
And we know that we won't be 100%, because what's going to end up happening is we may have gotten almost everything correct, and then somebody from another team is going to cut somebody that we like, and we're going to add him, and then that's going to
You
take a
speak for
spot away from
yourself, man.
somebody.
I'm going to get 100%.
You're gonna go predict who's going to get cut from other teams and who we're going to sign from those cuts. I love
Absolutely.
it.
I'm gonna put in all the work this weekend and make sure I have it.
Give me those lotto numbers while you're at it. By the way,
Yeah,
I'd appreciate those ones too.
we'll just call up Josh Metellus. He'll let us know, right? He knows
Yes.
what's going on inside the building. Yeah, so we'll do that early next week. We'll also probably do a preview or who to watch this weekend in the Cardinals Vikings final preseason game. But yeah, that's kind of all I have. If you're still here watching with us, again, make sure to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, to the podcast. Tell your friends and family before we get ramped up here for the regular season. For everybody that joined us in the chat tonight, Frozen North, Newt, Clifford, Dan, Dustin was in there. We appreciate your comments. We just love talking ball with each other, but having your guys' comments in there as well is always fun. So we appreciate that. So for myself and Ryan, that's it, everybody. Have a good Tuesday night, and Skull Vikings.